All right, so it's about 8:03, so we're going to go ahead and get started. We are here tonight to talk about poppets. I grabbed a black poppet, of course, and I'm wearing a black shirt, and you can't see him. There he is, this little guy right here. So, yeah, let's dive into the history of poppets first and talk about that a little bit. And um, let's start by talking about what is a poppet. You may have heard the name poppet before. You may have heard voodoo doll or clay effigy. There's lots and lots of terms for it. Voodoo doll is obviously the term that pop culture has taught us is used for these dolls, but we now know that that is a closed cultural practice, so it is not a term that we should use anymore. So that belongs to closed practices, and I kind of touch base on that a little bit more later, but we'll just kind of leave it at that. So poppets. Poppets are small figures of a human being or an animal, any kind of any kind of thing with that would have a spirit. So there are historically you've seen dogs, effigies of people, any animals, depending on the culture and the situation. But poppets can be made from clay, paper, cloth, wax, hair, grain, corn shafts like corn dollies, stuffed with herbs, cloth, feathers, just about anything that you could stuff something with. I mean, you can use fabric, scraps of fabric, cotton balls. There's all kinds of ways that you can stuff a poppet. I use polyfill for mine just because I can buy a huge bag of it and it lasts for practically ever because these guys don't take very much stuffing. Um, and then of course you can always, you stuff them with items that reflect your intent. Tonight, the one I'm going to be working on, this little white guy here, is for balance. And so we are going to be using some lavender, some basil, um, some different crystal chips. I've got amethyst here. I have some smoky quartz for that, and then some quartz crystal to amplify. So yeah, so the concept of poppets comes from the idea of sympathetic magic. And if you see on the screen here, I have the theory of sympathetic magic, and that is magic that is based on the assumption that a person or a thing can be metaphysically affected through its name or an object representing it. So, the history of poppets. Poppets go back, eh, and I say here the history of poppets in witchcraft, but that's not true. The history of poppets in cultural history goes back at least as far as the second millennium BCE. The earliest recorded use of a poppet was a spell recorded on a Mesopotamian clay tablet. It was a healing spell that appears to be a cure for a dog bite. The spell instructions are to take some clay, rub it on the wound of the person who was bitten, and then form it into the image of a dog or of the dog. And then say an incantation, leave the figurine on a wall in the sun to dry and eventually crumble. And as it crumbles, the concept is that the infection or injury from the dog bite will fade away with that clay effigy. I've got a few other different historical dolls that we have. We have paddle dolls from the ancient Egyptians. The ancient Egyptians believed statues and images contained part of the ka, or the spirit. And whether the effigy was of a god or a servant, they could be put into the paddle dolls. Children often played with paddle dolls. They were female effigies created from wood in the shape of a paddle, with, of course, the exaggerated hips that are very common in a lot of folklore and, classic uh, classic texts and images that we have. Thought to promote fertility. So, and then of course we can move on to the ancient Greeks and Romans who have the kolossoi. And the kolossoi were dolls that were used for cursing. They were used to petition restless spirits to do their bidding, often left in cemeteries to Usually they were clay effigies and they were crumbled. And of course, there's a lot of other cultures. I talk here about the Neo-Assyrian sites. And they used modest clay figurines as a means of guarding their homes. I do. I have protection poppets as well that I do, and I can, you can tie these to a person. So let's say you've got a kid who's having some nightmares. Maybe you could do a nightmare puppet to keep them safe at night. Those kinds of things that puppets can be used for. So, but in the Neo-Assyrian, in the Assyrian cultures, they used them to guard their homes. They were made in the form of gods, animals, and any kind of hybrid creatures. Objects were placed in boxes beneath the floors, in the corners, in the doorways, in any thresholds. And obviously, we recognize that because that is where we place our protections today. So, um, you know, it's always fun to go back and look at how things were done in ancient history and see that, there are things that we do that are very similar. And let's see. They used clay in Assyria because it was a primordial material of creation. And of course, we hear that in some of our Christian mythology as well, and in the Jewish mythology, in that, Adam and Lilith initially were created from clay. Um, so there are ties to that as well. And then, of course, the practice of poppets eventually traveled to ancient Britannia, where they were used for both healing and harm. People would make wax effigies of themselves or afflicted body parts. Let's say they had an injured leg or an infection that wouldn't heal. They could make a wax effigy of that body part, and then, of course, they would leave it at sacred sites all over ancient Britannia, and they believed that the healing energy from those sacred sites would continue to heal them through the doll even after they had left the site. So it was kind of leaving part of themselves there to continue that connection. So let's go. What do we got next? Ways to use poppets. I cover a bunch of different topics here, and in future slides, I'm going to get into some of the different things that you can do with that. But protection, self-love, attraction, physical and mental health, and balance, which is this little guy here. Creativity, success, and abundance, banishing mental and physic, psychic powers, luck, directing baneful energy, and purification and hex breaking. I'm not going to get into a lot of the directing baneful energy. If you guys want to talk more about that later, we can talk about it in the class, in the classroom thread, if we want to talk a little bit more about that. Let's see, things that you can add to your poppets. All right, so protection, balance, creativity, self-love, abundance, and luck. I have added some things here that you may want to put inside of those poppets, along with a rune that represents what the poppet is hoping to achieve, or what you're hoping your poppet's going to achieve. So I think right here, I'm going to go ahead and stop this presentation. We'll jump back into it in a bit, but I think we'll go ahead and maybe get started working on our little friends and get them going. So let me stop the stream. Hopefully, if you're making along with me, you've got your tools. I have this guy. He's kind of in a semi-complete status because I didn't want to have to take too long to finish him up and put him together, but I wanted him to be ready enough to receive his various spell ingredients and such. So let's see. I have a needle and thread here ready to go. I have a knot tied on one end. And if at any point anybody needs me to stop or slow down or re-explain something or show something better, please feel free to let me know. I'm kind of trying to figure out this setup with the camera in front of me and still be able to show you guys what I'm doing. So if you need me to take a step back or whatever, just let me know. So hopefully you've already cut out your little poppet, whichever I provided some patterns in my in the class. And I actually, little tip here, I use a Cricut to cut mine. I have a Cricut maker, and I have a SVG file of these that I have uploaded. And because I usually make these in larger quantities, I can take a decent sized sheet of felt and cut 4 to 6 individually out of each sheet, the way that they're laid out. So if there's any interest in that SVG file, let's say that you have a Cricut Maker and or a Cricut Explorer and you want to cut out some felt poppets, I'm happy to provide that for you guys as well. So, but it's nice because it just kind of does, the Cricut does the work for me, which I am totally okay with as far as the cutting goes. So, um, yeah, so once I have it cut out, then I use what's called a blanket stitch. If you've ever seen fleece blankets, they kind of have a stitching around the outside that wraps around without just the direct stitching in and out. Um, so this is a blanket stitch. Hopefully you guys can see that okay. So you can see how it kind of wraps around the outside of the piece of fabric. I will post a link to that, to the video that kind of walks you through the steps. Um, but basically, the process is to, I just tuck my thread inside the extra thread that's hanging out. Let's see if I can get this up where you guys can see it. So I run my needle through, and then before I pull the thread all the way through, I grab the loop of thread, and that's not showing up great for you guys, and I'm so sorry. I should film this with a camera over my hands. So then it catches the thread on the way through, and then I just continue that process all the way around until I get to about, I usually go around just past the foot because those are the hardest parts to stuff. And I want to, if I stop stitching right about here, and I usually leave that open, that gives me more than enough room to stuff in whatever I need to stuff into the doll before I sew it up all the way. So yeah, then I just kind of stitch as I go around. And again, 100% perfection is, I'm trying to become a reformed perfectionist where I don't stress about things like tiny mistakes. And obviously in this kind of thing, poppets don't have to be pretty to be functional. I've seen poppets made out of, um, bandanas stuffed with socks. I have seen puppets made out of, clay, obviously, um, but they don't have to be pretty to be functional. So don't get caught up in your stitches if they're close together. This is also another place that you can bring color magic in if you want to. If you want to utilize some color magic, you can use color magic on your thread. With your thread, you can use color magic obviously in the body of your poppet. And we'll talk about adornments later. Some people decorate the outsides of their poppets as they make them, to you know add extra intention to it. One thing that I will say is that, as you're stitching, focus on what you want this poppet's job to be. That is probably the most important thing because as you stitch this, you are sewing that intention into the doll. And I actually, when I visualize it in my head as I'm stitching, I am stitching my intentions into it. And of course, you can take that and you can use that through all kinds of craft magic. Um, it kind of has a tie back to knotting or cord magic, which we're going to talk about later in this course. I'm going to do some stuff. We're going to do some lessons on knot magic and cord magic, talk a little bit about some, how macrame can be used to protect your home and that sort of thing. So there's lots and lots of things that you can do in witchcraft with crafts, which is always um, you know, I think it's overlooked. I don't think that people realize that when we make some of these, witchy items, that that's what we're doing. Um, you know, and of course, as you as you create, as you bring this item to life, you are giving it a little bit of your spirit. You're also giving it some very good the energy of creation. I think I mentioned it in my um, you know, welcome to the class kind of thing on my channel, and said something to the effect of, creation magic obviously is very strong, and I think that people hear creation magic and they think, oh, bringing children into the world or creating art or creating music, but crafting is creation too. I'm taking thread and felt and stuffing and I'm turning it into something. And that is a pretty powerful thing. So, um, are there any questions? Anything you guys want to talk about related to Poppets? Maybe I can answer some curiosity questions if you have them. I absolutely do. Again, as I'm stitching this, I'm probably stitching, I would say anywhere from 200 to 300 stitches in this. It doesn't seem like that many when you're doing it because they actually go really fast, these blanket stitches. But again, that's an incredible amount of time while you're focusing because obviously just the act of stitching this up takes focus. So basically, as I'm focusing on that, I am also thinking about my intent. So I am essentially increasing the focus. Yes. And you can even, yeah, absolutely. And you can even, I've done God and Goddess poppets as well. So, you can, let's say that you have, uh, I'm trying to think here of, you want to do a working with Bridget, being that Imbolc just passed, right? You want to do something with her, and let's say maybe you don't have, you don't do a corn dolly, or you want to do something different for whatever the purpose of that working is. You can, make a puppet of her, adorn it like she would be adorned, or in a certain, maybe you found an image of her that has, flowers and daisies or whatever. Um, you could connect to her spirit in that way. Um, Hopefully that makes sense. But basically, the idea of these is that they are a connection to the spirit. And we're going to talk about how to connect the doll to its purpose here shortly, because we're going to talk a little bit about tag locks and witches links, and how to activate it once it's ready. So yes. And honestly, I know that you work with runes a lot and you make a lot of bind runes. So, in essence, you could do a, let's see, a blue doll for calming. You could do purple thread for like a dream connection. And essentially, you're creating a, a type of bind rune. You're creating something that has two purposes. Um, no, I absolutely think that you can, and you'll have to forgive me because I don't know the folklore behind the church dolls, but just like you might. give a enchanted protection stuffy to a child who needs to grieve or who needs to heal, like inside, um, there's no reason that these can't work the same way. Um, Sympathetic magic is base, the basis is that it is a representation, a physical representation of the spirit of something. So, you know, you could there are a lot of things that I think you could do with that. So I used to have, I don't, and maybe this is a Southern thing, so maybe some of you guys will recognize this. But when I was a kid, the they used to have these little bunnies made out of washcloths. And we called them boo boo bunnies. And basically they were like washcloths that were like folded and rubber band into like a little doll, a little bunny rabbit, and you could stuff like a bag of ice inside. Um, and then you put that on your boo boo. Um, but now that I think about it, like sitting here talking about this, now that I think about it, in a way, I mean, we used to, I mean, because I can remember being a kid and, you fall down, you skin your knee, and here comes the boo boo bunny. And you get this sense of calm, this sense of, it's that act of a mother putting a band aid on something. You get that feeling. And it's one of those things that just kind of just clicked in my head, like the association of energy with that. Obviously, just seeing the bunny come out was just enough, as a kid to calm me down. Okay, the boo boo bunny's here, everything's going to be fine. um so in a way, that in itself was a poppet. Again, the concept is the same. It's, that the intention of the boo boo bunny is to calm the child, to make them feel better, to kind of ease that pain. And while it's not an anesthetic, so it can't, actually ease the pain, it does. So that's its intention, that's its purpose. Kind of the same thing for these guys, or any kind of puppet or, spirit doll in this sense. It's the same principle, just, not for magical purposes, but I mean, who's to say that getting that kid to calm down really fast because they skinned their knee doesn't require a little bit of magic? Right. I mean, my band-aids have like magic powers. I swear to you. My kids get a paper cut or scratch their finger. There's no blood, nothing, but they need a band-aid, and that band-aid does the trick every time. It's like mom's kiss on a boo-boo. You know what I mean? Yeah, so I got my little guy stitched up here, all except for his side there. Um, so yeah, now we're gonna stuff him with stuffing, and I usually try to fill out the appendages first, the head, the arms, the feet, because those are the most difficult. I have a little trick that I use. I have these little channel lock uh, tools here, and I like to take the polyfill, grab a hold of it with the tool, because I find that my fingers don't function appropriately. My kids love it when I do this because they say it looks like I'm performing surgery. Um, and because so, and then I just take and I insert the polyfill, and then I just go like stuff it out the arm, or use the long nose of the pliers to push it up into the arm, into the head, into the legs, that sort of thing, so that he's evenly stuffed. Again, that's me. I have some OCDs about, crafts and the way that they're done. Again, nothing, there is nothing that says this has to be perfect. Um, some people do like adornments on the outside where they may put a heart, maybe stitch a piece of heart felt on the outside, or maybe a third eye to increase psychic powers or the connection with the other world. Um, so really, the possibilities are limitless with the things that you could do. And because it's crafting, you can get as complicated or as simple as as you want. Um, I think that 'cause I was going to say one of the dolls that I have pictured in the presentation is made entirely out of human hair, um, and that one's in the Witchcraft Museum in Salem, Massachusetts, I think, or in Massachusetts maybe. Um, but you know, there is really the possibilities are limitless. You can give it eyes, you can put buttons or stitch little cross marks for its eyes. I mean, there are so many ways that you can not necessarily humanize it, but strengthen its connection to whoever it's supposed to represent. You can give it hair. You can put clothes on it. If you have let's say that you want to connect, and this is kind of a tag lock thing as well, but let's say that you want to connect this to a specific person. Let's say that you're doing something for healing, maybe for grief for someone. Um, you could take a piece of the deceased person's clothing and put that connection to that person into the doll, which would then give the person who's grieving a piece of that person. Um, but in a more than just a cuddle buddy kind of way, if that makes sense. Yeah, so yarn dolls are absolutely a type of puppet. Um, yarn fabric scraps like torn into strips and then tied off with thread to create the body sections. Um, that but yeah, I mean, and they're similar in the way that corn dolls are designed, where you have the different sections of the body that are created by, you know, gathering and then tying off the corn husks. But what I was going to say is actually something else. You talked about putting like a heart or something like that inside the doll. So we're going to kind of get back to the slides in a minute because we're going to go ahead and stuff the dolls with the metaphysical crystals and the herbs and all of the stuff to give it its, to increase its intention. Really, what I was gonna say though is that in the presentation, I kind of tag out certain runes for each purpose. So you could take a stone, you could write in marker or paint pen the rune that represents the doll on the stone, and then put that inside as its heart or its head or whatever you're trying to represent. You can also um, you know, do that with, if you've got big enough crystal chips to write on, you can do the same thing. So, I mean, when I say the possibilities are endless, they absolutely are. Um, you know, I mean, you can take paper and you can make a petition or write a name or a sigil or a rune and then stuff that inside the doll, or you can do it on a rock, or you can do it with a button. Um, you know, you could do it with just about anything you find in your junk drawer, actually. You could put it on a bay leaf, which I have some right here because we're going to talk about that too. So, there are, yeah, I mean, the possibilities are absolutely endless of the things that you could put in on I mean, if think of all of the different things that you could do as far as intention goes, right? So, I mean, I list a few in the presentation, but there are really so many other things that you could do with intention. Let's say that you're going on you're traveling and you need a poppet, or you need something for protection. Instead of making a travel sachet, you can make a travel poppet. Put him in your cup holder and off you go. He becomes your road trip companion and he keeps you safe. Like, you know, uh, I don't know. I think they're fun. Okay. So, just like anything else, your focus is really key, right? How many different things? Let's say that I'm going to re-energize this guy, and because he's for balance, how many different things do I need to remember that he's got going on? Also, as you're stuffing him, as you're making him, if you are focusing on each one of those traits individually as you are putting them into the doll, then yes, I mean, you can go and go and go. However, you have to kind of, I think, at least just thinking about it right now, um, I would say don't give it too many tasks. You know what I mean? Just like, uh, just like you wouldn't give a child 5 steps of instructions at one time. You may give them one instruction at a time, right? So I kind of think of them the same way, because how much energy do I have to put into it? And how much energy does each one of those intentions, how much energy is that going to require of me in the energy exchange, right? If I were to do it, this is how I would do it. Let's say that I need to work on healing my inner child, right? So I may make a poppet for my inner child, but that's it. Um, because, and only because I feel like when you're focusing inward with things like that, um, it's important to acknowledge each one of those things that needs to heal one at a time, if that makes sense, as opposed to all at once. But I say that, and then my brain goes, wait. Um, but if you're just generally looking for some healing and comfort for, a traumatic experience, or for, um, just general overall, I think it depends on the situation. Maybe that's what I should say. I think it depends on the situation and how much energy you feel like you have, or are willing to exchange for that. Does that make sense? Okay, good. I got myself confused with that one. All right, so absolutely. And I think I mean, there's a lot of that. And I think for me, it was very funny because I'll be honest with you. When I found Witch Talk, I didn't know that jar spells were a thing. Okay. And I've been practicing since 97. So I didn't, and I was like, jar spells. And of course, my mind immediately went, well, why would you put the energy in a jar? Like, and of course, I don't have an extensive experience of baneful magic. Obviously, now I get the need for jars for certain things, especially if you want to tuck someone away, right? But I was very confused because I've always used bags or poppets. Um, so I was like, what is this jar thing that everybody's doing? And I still have some times when I go, but I want protection, or I want I need to do a jar for self-love or for confidence. And I just think to myself, why would you contain the energy in a jar? Um, I want that energy to get out because I want that energy to come at me, right? So but yes, it is. It's one more way that you can, tap into the spirits of the plants and the crystals and all of the things. I mean, you guys know that I'm an animist. So, I firmly believe that, when I'm done with this little guy, he's going to have a spirit just like the tree outside. Um, so, oh, I'm so glad. I'm so glad to hear that. So yes, I get that. I get that, you see puppets and spirit dolls used a lot in baneful practice. We see it in pop culture. We see it in, I know that a lot, and forgive me again because I'm not a folk magic practitioner, but I see it in a lot of root working, and that sort of thing. And so I get it. Like, obviously, it makes sense in baneful magic because you're building a representation of the place that you're sending the energy to, right? So it's kind of, it's it's bringing that spirit to you, so you don't have to go to it. You know what I mean? Um, but it the same thing applies for yourself. If you're making this as a representation of, you know, eh, they can be guardians, they can be protectors, they can be, you know, confidence boosters. Anything that you can, anything that you could do with a candle and some color, you could do with a poppet because all of the principles are the same. The color, the intention, the by stitching it together, that's my, carving my intention into the candle, right? Um, all of those pieces and the principles behind each type of working can be utilized in this way. And for me, because, I have focus issues, but I love to sew. I love to craft and create, and I can get lost almost into a meditative trance or a meditative state while I'm stitching something, because it's that repetitive action that creates the cycle of my breath and the beat of my heart and all of those things that I'm now more in tune to because I'm focused on this. So, it's again just another method, I guess. It's funny because I haven't sewn in a while, and I had a lot of I go through like times when I bounce from craft to craft or hobby to hobby. But for me, this is the place that I'm most comfortable is with a needle and thread in my hand. And it's the place where I'm most at peace and where I'm most relaxed. And I find that I forget sometimes, like, "Ah, I can't meditate because I can't focus." Well, I can meditate. I just have to do it my way. A lot of people get hung up on having to do it one way or another. And there are, some people dance, some people sing, some people, work out. And that's a form of meditation. Right. And people forget that, I think, because it is so common. Like, we think of the common, person sitting in a lotus position with their hands tucked to the side, saying mantras, Well, when I sew, I have OCD, so I count. Um, as I do things. So I just count my stitches and I count them over and over and over again. But I find that as I get into that, like as it gets going and I'm making, I'm into it and I'm making progress, I can catch myself like matching my stitches to my breathing or hearing my heartbeat, being able to feel my heartbeat. As you kind of sink into that meditative state, sometimes you can hear your heartbeat, in your head or in your ears. Um, and I match what I'm doing to that. So I'm actually prolonging that state of being, which I really need to do. It's been a really long time since I've had one of those things, but um, yeah. So I'm sorry, guys, we got carried away with questions and stuff. So I am right now putting my herbs into my doll, and you know, make sure you leave some room. Don't be like me and have to be. I don't charge them beforehand. I charge them after. Once everything is put together, um, I I have a system of what I call activation, and basically, where I am once the doll is complete, I treat it like a physical being, and I whisper to it what its job is, and I have I think I've told a few people, but one of the ways for me for activating is using my breath, because the breath that we expel as humans, it actually contains all five elements that we, if you're looking at a pentagram, you've got the four major elements and then spirit, right? So our breath contains all of those. It contains water in your saliva. It contains air, obviously, in the air that you're expelling. It contains fire in the heat of your body, and it contains spirit in that is the breath that is keeping you alive, right? So that has, at least in my mind, very powerful energy. So I talk to it. I whisper to it what its job is. I tell it what I intend for it to do. And then I will usually either, sit with it, meditate with it, depending on what its purpose is. I'll spend some time with it, sending my energy into it. Obviously, it's carrying my energy because I have made it. I am its creator. Basically, it's not ready until I tell it what to do. Kind of like, I don't know much about servitors, um, but in some of my research, it's that same kind of they are the doll is I say dumb. I mean it doesn't have its purpose until you give it its purpose. So its head is empty until you fill it, if that makes sense. That's me reaching for words. So that may be completely foreign. That's why I'm here. I'm here to learn and to grow with each and every one of you. And it just tickles me to know that I said something that sparked a thought or a feeling or an emotion. Yeah. So thank you for that. But I do want to, while we're finishing up here, I'm going to pull this presentation back up so you guys can see the last couple of slides, because we are going to, this is the one I need. All right. So, I've got here things that you can add to your Poppets, right? And I've covered several different, I didn't cover all of the ones on my list for intentions, but I covered some ones that I think are pretty good and probably people don't think about. You need some wealth and abundance. Instead of doing a money bowl, you can build an abundance Poppet and you can put him in your pocketbook and carry him with you, and encourage that energy, right, to come to you. Uh, Creativity, I feel like that one doesn't really need an explanation. But I have a puppet that lives in my studio where I work, where I sew and stuff. And, he hangs out in my studio with me. And, that's his purpose, is to bring me creative energy. Um, Self-love, you can build one that, oh, I really have to tie that in a knot. Shoot, I don't want to dump him out. Hang on. Sorry, guys. I realized I didn't have a knot in that string. Um, yeah, so, I have so many of these little guys floating around the house. Um, my kids tell me all the time they look like gingerbread men, and I'm like, yeah, of course they look like gingerbread men. That's where I got the pattern. Um, the pattern was a gingerbread man that at one point. But you know, it, they can be anything. They could be so many things. I guess is what I'm trying to get at. And you know, you can your imagination, it really is the limit. I mean, there is no limit to what you could do, or um, how you could use one of these. I really don't think that there is. I At least at this point in time, I haven't come up with anything um, that you know I don't feel like fits. I mean, if you could put it in a sachet, if you could put it in a bottle or a jar, you could put it in a poppet. Yeah, so that's a really good question. I don't. Um, And the reason that I say that, however, I don't think that anyone else should touch it. But seeing it personally, I don't think diminishes its power. You could take one of these and make it as a guardian and set it on your fireplace, right? People come in your home, they may see it, they probably won't know what it is, but they're seeing it, in my opinion, wouldn't diminish its energy. Now, would I want them to walk over and pick it up? Absolutely not. Because then I would have to cleanse it of their energy and re redo redo it or re-energize it. I wouldn't remake it, but I would probably spend some time with it, um, kind of like energizing your wards. Yes, absolutely. So the next slide, can you guys see that one? Oh, my picture's not showing up. He was cute. Anyways, um, so here are my steps for activating or enchanting your puppet, depending on how you want to, whatever you want to, however you want to say it. There's lots of different ways that people say it. I actually prefer enchanting because I just really like the word and I think it's fancy and magical. But obviously, you're going to craft your puppet with intention, with purpose, right? As you're putting it together. You are going to provide the tag lock or the witch's link before closing the body. So I myself use, and I think we established that I don't have any minors in here, but I use my blood. Okay, to link myself to my puppets. I have always done, I know that there were some of us who had a conversation the other night about blood magic and using blood as a tag lock and an activator. So, um, sometimes it's unintentional, where I just stab myself in the finger and then go, "Oh, okay, well, you have claimed your your energetic price," right? Um, but again, you can use hair, fingernails, your fingernail clippings, anything that connects that item to whatever it's representing. It can be clothing, it can be a photograph, it can be a fingerprint, it can be a signature. There's lots of things that you can use as a tag lock in a poppet. Um, yes, absolutely still effective because those items, you have connected those items with their representation, right? So you made sigils that represented each one of you. That becomes in its simplest form, creating a sigil that represents you is the same as creating a poppet that represents you, right? Obviously, the puppet is more powerful because it has more um, more energy, more intention placed into it. but you have essentially created a representation of you on paper. So yeah, if anybody's curious, this slide that's up right now is what is a tag lock or a witch's link? And again, a tag lock or a witch's link is a personal item, image, or another object that links back to a target. Um, I, I hesitated putting target on here, but there wasn't a better word for it because and again, it doesn't mean target in a negative or baneful way. It can, but mostly it's just that where is it going? What is it linking to? Right? Stop A and stop B. And then metaphysically speaking, this can be hair, fingernail clippings, teeth, bodily fluids, fingerprints, or any number of other things directly associated with a spirit. Again, as an animist, when I say spirit, that can be any number of things. Now that we know what a tag lock is, we're going to jump back over here to activation. So once your Poppet is complete and you have sewn him up, you have put in all of the goodies inside, the herbs, the crystals, the sigil, the rune if you want to use one. Then, like I said, you need to tell your Poppet what you want it to do. So, like I said, I whisper to mine. I whisper into his little ear, just like I would a kiddo, and give him his purpose. And then once you've done that, you can charge it or energize it in any way that you feel is appropriate, whether that's, sitting with it in between your receptive and your projective hand energies and filling that with energy. If you use a energy ball, you can put that energy ball into it. You can charge it on your altar if you would like. I myself prefer to charge things with my hands as opposed to like leaving something on my altar because I like to have that physical connection and because I feel and manipulate energy with my hands. I can feel the energy change in it as it becomes energized. So, and then again, place the poppet somewhere safe or where it would need to be based on its purpose. So, historically, people would put them under baseboards, in corners, on windows or door sills, thresholds, um, you know. But let's say, if you want, if you did one for confidence or for self-love and self-esteem, you might put him on your vanity table, where you sit and do your makeup, and in a way, it becomes part of your glamour magic routine, or you know any other number of things. So I just need to make sure that it stays wherever it needs to be. And again, with any magical working, re-energize as necessary. If you have one for protection or one to banish negativity, um, you know, if you just like, you may have a jar of rice at your front door that collects the negativity as people move through your threshold. Same thing. If it feels like it needs to be cleaned, if its energy feels like it's off, then do what's appropriate for you to get it back to its working state. I personally, um, you know, eventually they outgrow their purpose. Their purpose no longer exists, so they don't need to exist any longer. Um, and at that point, you could dispose of them. You could cut them open. What if you want to if you want to salvage the crystals that are in there and cleanse them and re-energize them, you could do that. Um, you know, burying the herb pieces in the backyard. Because I use felt and polyfill, I wouldn't bury one of these because it's not natural fibers, and I wouldn't put that back into the earth. I also wouldn't burn it unless I had a decent, like fireplace or something. I'm not going to put him in my cauldron, not going to put him in my little cauldron and let it burn that way. But I don't have a fireplace. So, and I mean, again, dispose of it any way that you see fit. If, it is just felt. So you could actually cleanse it, and then take the felt and the polyfill and cut it down and reuse it to stuff another poppet. Um, that's very eco-friendly. It just popped into my head. I was like, why didn't I think about that before? And that would, at least in my opinion, that would serve its purpose. So, but just the last slide that I have here is things to think about. Things to think about. You may hear these called poppets, pippies, effigy dolls, colossois, moppets. Fetishes is common. Fetch is also another term. I know that one has some other things associated with it in various Celtic practices. A fetch is also a doppelganger or a representation of you in spirit form. So you may hear that. You could call them spirit dolls. I do mention here again that voodoo dolls are common in popular culture, but that name is part of a closed spiritual practice. The idea of a spirit doll, though, isn't limited to voodoo or hoodoo practices. Many religious practices, spiritual practices use dolls or effigies to represent many different things. If you do any kind of research on them, you can look for poppets, spirit dolls, or any of the other names that I mentioned up above, and you will be able to find historical actual finds in museums, pictures, which I think is pretty cool that we can actually go back and see some of the ones that have been found in tombs or in various locations. And then, of course, with any kind of working, always be respectful and practice energetic consent. Don't make one of these unless you have someone's permission. Obviously, there are exceptions to that rule, but I don't want to get into the really baneful side of this because because I don't feel that's a topic for another day. Um, but that is all I have. Do you guys have any further questions or discussion or anything that I can answer or we can talk about? Yeah, well, two things. One, you're welcome. Two, never, ever apologize for asking questions. I love getting questions because for me, I I really struggle sometimes, like because you know because I don't have that prompting. I don't have that prompt that says, "Hey, let's talk about X, Y, and Z." And because I like to talk about this kind of stuff, it's fun to get the question because then I have a topic and then I have something to jump off of. So thank you for your questions. Don't ever apologize for asking me questions. I am more than happy to answer them. And if you guys have any, later down the road, my DMs are always open. I love to answer questions. Sometimes I just lurk through the channels. I'm usually around, but depending on the day, I may not be super chatty, but that doesn't mean I won't answer your question if you have one. So, yeah, so that's it, guys. There's Poppets. I hope you enjoyed the class and I hope you learned something. I will be posting all of the resources in the class channel, if not tonight, tomorrow sometime. All right, guys, I have kept you for an hour and a half. I'm so sorry. I hope everybody's okay with that. I didn't intend for it to be this long, but I'm really glad that you all hung out, and yeah, I guess that's it. If there's nothing else for me, then I'm just gonna close this out and see you guys next time. Good night. Thank you so much for joining me.